Chapter 1989. Story. Chapter 1989. Story. Some people were using boats to traverse the divine ocean. Many boats were floating on the divine ocean. On one of the boats, Futian was lying down quietly. Xia Qingyuan sat behind him, and Black Wind Condor was looking all around beside him. On the other boats behind them were the other cultivators. Goddess Donglai, Zifeng as well as Bai Mu were together. Beigong Ao and Beigong Shuang were on the same boat. They all rowed boats as they followed behind Futian. "It is rare for us to have such a cozy time," commented Beigong Ao as he admired the scenery in the distance. The sky merged with the horizon. The shadows of ancient buildings could faintly be seen in the sky. They seemed to be mirages. "Just take a rest," said Futian in front with a smile. His hands were behind his head, and he was very relaxed. It was indeed rare for them to have such a moment. For many years, he had always been cultivating. He had never stopped and did not dare to slack. There was not much meaning for them to find a place to cultivate on this journey in the divine ocean continent. They might as well take this opportunity to relax and forget about cultivating for a while. It felt very nice wandering around on the boundless divine ocean, going wherever the wind brought them. When they lifted their heads, they could occasionally see people passing over them in the sky above. For them to be able to see people passing over them on the vast ocean from time to time, one could imagine how many people had come to the divine ocean continent and were heading to Turtle Deity Island. "I wonder what it will look like when I break through the next plane and face a tribulation," Futian mumbled to himself. He believed that one day he would face a divine tribulation. If that day comes for you, the divine prefecture might be shocked, and the whole world might come to celebrate it, a gentle voice said beside Futian. Futian raised his head slightly and saw a beautiful face enter his field of view. Xia Qingyuan lowered her head and looked at him. Futian's words made her look forward to such a day. If he were to face a divine tribulation in the future, what a sight would that be like? "Or I might make the whole world my enemy, and the members of the divine prefecture will all come to kill me," Futian said. He did not know what the future would be like. As his cultivation improved, he should get closer to revealing the secrets of his life. He did not know how the divine prefecture would react once it was revealed. Would they celebrate, or would they come to kill him? "That won't happen," said Xia Qingyuan seriously as she looked him in his eyes. "Who knows?" said Futian with a smile. No one could predict what his future path would be like. He could only walk it one step at a time. Xia Qingyuan looked at him. She knew that Futian always kept secrets about him that he himself was not sure of. "Even if all of creation were to become your enemy, I would still be by your side," whispered Xia Qingyuan. She did not look at Futian. She was staring far off into the distance. Would such a day come? Futian looked at her beautiful face and revealed a gentle smile. This world had treated him well. Although he had encountered many dangers on his journey of cultivation and had made many enemies, he also had many people close to him as well as seniors who remained standing on his side, supporting him up until now. The sound of waves constantly beating against the boat kept sounding. The boat floated along with the waves. A light shroud surrounded the little boat and prevented the ocean water from entering the boat. They seemed to float along the currents without any direction, not knowing where they would end up. Futian took a nap. It had been a long while since he had slept. Cultivators absorbed the spiritual qi from all creation. They did not need to eat or sleep, especially once they became saints. Hence, Futian rarely slept at all. Only when he heard sounds did Futian wake up from his nap on the boat. He opened his eyes. His gaze was somewhat lax. He looked up and saw that Xia Qingyuan was still sitting there with her head lowered as she looked at him. Seeing Futian opening his eyes, she shifted her gaze. She had an embarrassed look on her face, as though she had been discovered peeping. With a smile, Futian asked, "What is that sound?" "We have reached the coast. It seems to be a training ground. There are quite a number of people up ahead," said Xia Qingyuan softly as she lowered her head and looked at him. Futian sat up and looked ahead. On the coast nearby, many cultivators were gathered. There seemed to be patterns carved on the cliff by the ocean. Many people were standing on the reef by the coast and looking at the cliff face. Futian's will swept out. He saw that the patterns were drawings of a human figure. The figure was practicing axe techniques. When his will invaded the drawings, the figure seemed to move. It contained an extremely powerful aura of the great path of thunder, causing the might of the great path of thunder to emanate from the cliff face. Uttered Yi Futian as he revealed a strange expression. He actually discovered that the drawing was extraordinary. The axe technique was very powerful. When his will invaded the drawing, he witnessed an extremely frightening scene. Could it be that there was a fateful encounter of the great path located here? If that was so, Yi Futian's luck was quite good. It is not just this cliff face. Take a look around, said Beigong Ao with a bizarre expression. His gaze shifted across the entire cliff face along the coast. He discovered that aside from this complete drawing, the surrounding cliffs were covered in markings. The marks extended very far. It was as though the entire coast was carved with these marks. This drawing was carved after the person completed his training. The person must have had an epiphany, commented Yi Futian with a nod after he glanced at the marks on the cliff. They continued riding their boats as they moved on. Occasionally, some people would pass by and land when they saw this scene. On a huge boulder on the reef, there was a young couple. Their cultivation was not very high. They were still at the Sage Plain. May I ask what this place is? Beigong Ao asked the two of them when Yi Futian's group passed by them. The two of them glanced over at Beigong Ao and the others. They immediately understood that Yi Futian's group might be powerful cultivators from abroad. The youth bowed slightly and said, "This place was the training ground of Thunder Punishing Skylord." "Thunder Punishing Skylord?" exclaimed Beigong Ao with a surprised look. It seemed that it was another incredible figure. The youth nodded. Back when Thunder Punishing Skylord was at the upper-level Renhuang Plain, he headed to Turtle Deity Island to seek teachings. He found Emperor Shi. However, Emperor Shi did not teach him, instead asking him to find a place to carve his way. Emperor Shi told him to forget everything and to stop cultivating the great path of all things. Thunder Punishing Skylord came here and carved his way into the cliff face for 30 years before he managed to reach enlightenment. The youth continued. After Thunder Punishing Skylord broke through to the next plane, he headed over to Turtle Deity Island to ask Emperor Shi to accept him as a pupil. Emperor Shi did not see him, claiming that it was his own fateful encounter and was unrelated to Emperor Shi. However, Thunder Punishing Skylord always considered himself a pupil of Emperor Shi. This place was his previous training ground and has not been erased. Rumor has it that within the cliff, there is a treasure that he left behind. However, it is just a rumor. I do not know whether it is actually true. Impressive, exclaimed Beigong Ao with respect. Both Emperor Shi and Thunder Punishing Skylord were awe-inspiring. Both of them were extraordinary figures. Emperor Shi gave pointers without asking for anything in return. Thunder Punishing Skylord also recognized Emperor Shi as his teacher. Even though he had already reached enlightenment, he still treated Emperor Shi as his teacher. He also did not erase everything he had carved here, leaving it behind for the generations to come. It might be that he was touched by Emperor Shi's guidance and hoped that these markings would be beneficial for other cultivators. Yi Futian was also secretly impressed. This time, when Emperor Shi faced his tribulation, Thunder Punishing Skylord might also be there. Yi Futian never imagined that such a giant figure would have such a story to him. It was amazing. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1990, Cliff Face. Chapter 1990, Cliff Face. Seniors, have all of you arrived from other continents? The youth asked as he smiled at Yi Futian's group. Replied Beigong Ao as he nodded his head. We heard about the news from Turtle Deity Island and have come here from distant lands. My name is Lin Yuan. This here is my path companion, Lu Qing, said the youth. After the news regarding Turtle Deity Island got out, cultivators from various continents have come to the Divine Ocean continent. This place is somewhat famous in the Divine Ocean continent. However, it is not very well known outside since there are many ruins in the Divine Prefecture. Recently, there have been many visitors, like yourselves, who have stopped to take a look when they come across this place. Across the years, has no one managed to comprehend the way carved into the cliff face? Asked Yi Futian. I do not know. Each person might be able to comprehend bits and pieces, Lin Yuan replied. However, rumor has it that the drawings are scattered. Back then, thunder-punishing Skylord carved 30 years' worth of his insights here. This axe technique is rumored to have come into being when his way was complete. Different cultivators will have their own understanding of it. As for whether or not anyone has completely comprehended the entire set, we won't be able to know. I see, replied Yi Futian as he nodded his head. Seniors, your temperaments are extraordinary. You must be from top forces of other continents, right? Lin Yuan asked. Yi Futian looked at him and saw a faint look of anticipation in Lin Yuan's eyes. I guess you could say that, answered Yi Futian as he nodded with a smile. May I move alongside all of you? I am willing to act as your guide, Lin Yuan asked as he bowed slightly. When Yi Futian heard him say this, he turned to look at Lin Yuan. With a smile, Yi Futian pointed out, You want to attend the ceremony on Turtle Deity Island, don't you? The couple did not have powerful cultivation. For top figures, the Divine Ocean continent was not considered large. However, for sages, it was still massive. With their cultivation planes, they would also most likely be unqualified to step onto Turtle Deity Island. However, they did not want to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now that they had encountered Yi Futian's group and Lin Yuan saw that Yi Futian had an extraordinary temperament and was well-mannered, he took his chance. He wanted to pay a visit to Turtle Deity Island. Although Lin Yuan was very far from reaching the next plane, this might be the only chance in his life for him to have the opportunity to witness a top figure face a divine tribulation. If he missed it this time, he might not get another chance in this lifetime. When Yi Futian saw the hopeful look in the other party's eyes, he smiled and said, Let's try our luck. If I can comprehend the way of the great path from the cliff face, I will bring you along with us. If I am unable to do so, then we will not bring you with us. When Lin Yuan heard Yi Futian say this, a look of disappointment flashed past in his eyes. Although Yi Futian's group might be a top force from other continents, thunder-punishing Skylord had been the one who carved the way into the cliff face. Many prominent figures in the Divine Ocean continent had come here before. Although they each had their own snippets of understanding, no one dared to claim that they had completely comprehended the way of the great path on the cliff face. Even though Yi Futian had an extraordinary temperament, there was still little chance of him succeeding. His disappointment was gone in a flash. Lin Yuan smiled and said, Senior, you will certainly be able to do so. Yi Futian smiled. Lin Yuan got up from where he was sitting on the reef and said, Senior, please sit. As he said this, he stepped away from the reef. Yi Futian did not hesitate and walked up to Lin Yuan's spot. Yi Futian glanced at the cliff face before him. In front of him, many people stood, comprehending the cliff face from different locations. You really want to go to Turtle Deity Island, don't you? Lu Qing asked Lin Yuan over thought transmission as she looked at him. Lin Yuan replied as he nodded his head. This is a chance that comes once every 1,000 years. Even if I cannot make it in, I want to watch from the outside. Facing a divine tribulation might shake the entire Turtle Deity Island and might also be visible from the outside. Lu Qing said, Our cultivation is not bad. However, just as you said, this is an occasion that comes once every 1,000 years. These past few days, cultivators have been passing over us every day. All the top figures of the entire Donghua domain will be coming. With our cultivation, we have no standing. If the disturbances during the divine tribulation are too great, or there are other accidents, our abilities will most likely be of no help. It seemed as though she did not want to go. Facing the top figures of the Donghua domain who had gathered made her feel pressured. This was also a divine tribulation, which might cause a huge disturbance. It was a rare event in 1,000 years. A slight mishap would be catastrophic. When that happened, their measly cultivation would not be sufficient to cope. Hence, Lu Qing was slightly conservative. She was afraid of the potential dangers. She felt that such an occasion would not end peacefully. If they were to follow Yi Futian's group to the island, the risk would be even greater. Lin Yuan countered, "Back then, thunder-punishing Sky Lord carved his way here for 30 years when he sought his way. In the end, he succeeded in earning the title of Sky Lord. With my current cultivation plane, what right do I have not to pursue my way and expand my horizons? By observing the divine tribulation, even if we can only comprehend very little of it, its significance for us will be extraordinary." Lin Yuan held Lu Qing's hands as he spoke. Lu Qing nodded her head slightly. This time, she would follow him and see this world's strongest tribulation. Yi Futian looked at the cliff face. His gaze became extremely bizarre. A fascinating beauty emanated from his figure. He looked at the patterns that seemed like runes. They resembled a person training with a war axe. At that moment, in his mind, it was as though these people were moving, swinging the war axe around. Incredible, Yi Futian praised when he sensed the will of the war axe. This war axe was mighty. However, this did not seem difficult. He could clearly sense the might of the great path within these drawings and could comprehend them very easily. Next, Yi Futian turned towards the second drawing. It was slightly different from the previous one, yet also very similar. Both were awe-inspiring axe techniques. Yi Futian quietly stood there and comprehended the techniques. Beside him, Beigong Ao and Beigong Shuang were also looking at the cliff face and comprehending the techniques. Just as Lin Yuan had said, each person would have a different understanding of the drawings. Behind them, Lin Yuan watched them silently. Although he did not have high hopes for them to succeed, he still waited there quietly. He could also cultivate while waiting for them. In the divine ocean, before the cliff face, many people were discussing frantically, debating about the way on the cliff face. At that moment, more people descended from the sky and landed before the cliff face. This group of people similarly were beyond average. Each person had an extraordinary temperament. This was left behind after thunder-punishing Sky Lord comprehended his way back then. Rumor has it that there is a treasure left behind by him in the cliff face. Whoever can master the technique will be able to obtain this treasure, said a youth right then as he looked at a woman beside him. This woman had an outstanding appearance. She had an otherworldly air to her, as though she was a goddess. This caused many people to steal glances at her. However, they soon shifted their gazes away, not daring to stare too long. At a glance, one could tell that these two groups of people who had arrived were not from ordinary backgrounds. Everyone was aware of the current situation in the divine ocean continent. Cultivators had gathered in droves. Many of them could not be offended. Hence, everyone would try to keep a low profile. The people who arrived were most likely cultivators from top forces from outside the divine ocean continent. No one would dare act rudely towards them. "The technique is very powerful," said the woman as she glanced at the cliff face. It was as though she could tell at a glance and could not help but give praise. "I have seen thunder-punishing Sky Lord before. Back then he visited our manor as a guest. Senior thunder-punishing Sky Lord is an outstanding figure. The techniques he left behind would naturally be extremely powerful," stated the youth as he smiled slightly. Immediately, many people cast sideways glances at him. His words implied many things. Thunder-punishing Sky Lord had previously visited his manor as a guest? What did this mean? That meant that the clan which this youth was from had an existence at the same level as thunder-punishing Sky Lord. Only then would they be qualified for thunder-punishing Sky Lord to visit them. Without a doubt, this youth was from a superpower. The woman was not surprised. She clearly knew that the youth's clan had the means to do so. They were indeed from a superpower. They were from the Donghua heavens. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. As expected, his comprehension was more in-depth than their own. It was clear as day. It was as though they had returned to the time when thunder-punishing Sky Lord was cultivating. After a long while, Yi Futian stopped cultivating. The two of them continued comprehending on their own. Yi Futian glanced over at the drawings on the surrounding cliff faces. He looked at the markings. There seemed to be many axe marks that were one with the cliff face, as though they were carved by the simplest axe swing. These marks did not contain any will, only leaving behind marks. Many marks contained the will of the great path. All this seemed very erratic. Yi Futian could not make out the true meaning of thunder-punishing Sky Lord carving these marks. Right then, the Renhuang from the Donghua heavens said, "Thunder-punishing Sky Lord comprehended his way here for decades, carving these axe techniques into the cliff face." As expected, the axe techniques are extraordinary. Each axe swing can be its own form of attack. These attacks can be combined into one complete set of axe techniques naturally. However, wanting to comprehend this set of techniques does not seem easy. The woman beside him looked ahead. However, she did not say anything. What she felt from the cliff face was not quite the same as what the other party sensed. At that moment, Beigong Shuang also opened her eyes and looked at the cliff face. Her beautiful eyes looked towards Yi Futian. She asked, "Have you comprehended it?" Each axe technique can serve as its own attack. With enough time, I can comprehend all of them. However, I have yet to comprehend them as a whole, Yi Futian said as he shook his head. He could not make any heads or tails of it. He did not know how to merge them perfectly. Commented Beigong Shuang as she nodded. Could it be that there is no relation between them in the first place? Maybe each form of the axe technique was simply carved by thunder-punishing Sky Lord without any real thought to it? It might not even be a complete set of war axe techniques? When Yi Futian heard what Beigong Shuang said, a strange look flashed past through his eyes. If they did not try to make it one complete set, it was indeed explainable. However, had thunder-punishing Sky Lord been simply carving when he left these drawings here? They do seem to be independent of each other. However, if that is the case, someone should have comprehended it already. Why is it that no one has managed to solve the secret of the cliff face? Yi Futian asked. Unless the rumors of the cliff face are false and that there are no secrets here. This place was just the training grounds of thunder-punishing Skylord. Beigong Shuang also did not understand. She mumbled, "However, I feel that each axe technique is independent. Is it because my cultivation is too low?" "You might be correct," Yi Futian said with a smile. Beigong Shuang was a straightforward person. The last time when he came to my manor, a senior of my clan brought this up with thunder-punishing Skylord. Thunder-punishing Skylord claimed that after comprehending his way for decades, he did not need it anymore. If so, where is that treasure now? Beigong Shuang nodded her head. That meant to say that there was indeed the possibility that there was a treasure hidden here. Since no one has destroyed the cliff face, that means that it cannot be destroyed. How could these drawings simply be carved by thunder-punishing Skylord? The other party continued his line of reasoning. Beigong Shuang nodded her head and said, "What you say is not without reason, but still does not explain everything." The other party was stunned. He gave Beigong Shuang a strange look. He thought that Beigong Shuang was intentionally arguing with him. "With your level of cultivation, you are not yet qualified to discuss the way with me. If I say you are wrong, he said indifferently. His tone also seemed colder. He glanced over at Yi Futian's group. These people were probably from a large force. However, he was not too concerned. In the Donghua domain, there were few forces whom he could not afford to offend. Beigong Shuang was stunned. She stopped talking and did not continue to argue with him. She seemed to understand the attitude of the other party. She also did not want to stir up trouble. Beigong Ao gave the other party an intense gaze. However, he also did not cause a scene. He had followed Yi Futian here. He naturally would not cause trouble for Yi Futian. Seniors, it is but a different understanding of the way and a difference in opinions. Why must we get so worked up over it? Lin Yuan could not help but say when he saw the atmosphere turn somewhat awkward. The other party swept a glance at him. With just a glance, he seemed to penetrate Lin Yuan's eyes, causing Lin Yuan to feel as though a terrifying power had descended upon him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. In the world of cultivation, many disputes were caused by minuscule matters, and these unimportant matters were not worth the price. Lin Yuan didn't want to see that happening here. Yi Futian's words stunned the young man who had already turned around, and he slowly turned back around again. His eyes landed squarely on Yi Futian. However, Yi Futian did not pay any attention to him. Instead, he said to Lin Yuan, "I will take you to go with me to Turtle Deity Island." Lin Yuan wasn't overjoyed when he heard what Yi Futian said. He was actually a little worried about him. After all, the other person was from a principality that even thunder-punishing Skylord would have to reckon with, which only demonstrated the extent of their power. Yi Futian's attitude worried him a little. This kind of talk could easily intensify conflicts, and this trivial matter may become a fuse. Elder, Lin Yuan wanted to say something but didn't know quite how to say it. Then it's decided. Yi Futian smiled and cut off whatever it was that Lin Yuan wanted to say. I have already said that she was wrong. At this moment, the young man spoke. Looking at Yi Futian, his eyes were sharp. Yi Futian turned his attention on the man. Things that happened before were just a small mat. Like Lin Yuan stated, different perceptions yielded different opinions, and each was entitled to their own opinions. That was all, and they need not interfere with one another. However, if the other insisted that they were in the wrong when Beigong Shuang had already made a concession, did the other party mistake their courtesy as weakness? She's right. Yi Futian stared into the other person's eyes and responded without fear. If they wanted to fight, he would gladly oblige. If Beigong Shuang was not qualified to be in discussion with him, was he qualified himself? Based on what? The other questioned. I think she is right, so she is right. What other reason do you need? Yi Futian's voice was indifferent. His own opinions didn't need to have a reason. The man suddenly smiled a little sarcastically. So, you think you understood the secret of the cliff? He sneered. And you think you have? Yi Futian retorted. No, the other responded readily. Since no one understands it to prove me wrong, then I am still right in what I think. Unless you can comprehend a set of axe techniques from it, what else can you use to question the opinions of others? Yi Futian asked, still refuting the other's view. The will of the great path pervaded from the other man, as he smiled at Yi Futian and said, Where are you from, and from which principality? Does this have anything to do with cultivating on the cliff? Yi Futian replied with a question instead. The man stared at Yi Futian and said, No, it does not. If not, then why did you ask? Yi Futian replied, just like how the other man had responded to Beigong Shuang and Lin Yuan before, with an unrelenting tone that was aggressive in nature. Chapter 1993. Decoded. Chapter 1993. Decoded, Return to Innocence. Yi Futian said to himself as he looked at the cliff. This was the transcendence of the way, and he was the representation of the way. Thunder-punishing Skylord had engraved the way for decades before he took that step and transformed. Yi Futian had come into contact with many impressive top figures in the past, which was why he could more or less perceive the realm of thunder-punishing Skylord. The engravings that he carved on the cliff were not a complete set of axe techniques, but was a record of the transformation of his realm, the process of his transcendence. Shuang, you were right, Yi Futian said. Back then when the thunder-punishing Skylord enlightened the way and beyond, everything that was engraved here denoted his process of enlightenment. Although not meant to be a complete set of axe techniques, each technique was independent of the other. Therefore, after his enlightenment, thunder-punishing Skylord no longer needed the treasure. Even top-level divine item no longer meant anything to him. Beigong Shuang regarded him with her beautiful eyes and asked, Did you comprehend it? This dude, did he get it again? Her impression of Yi Futian was that he had a great ability to comprehend. It seemed as if there was nothing that he couldn't understand. Not yet, but I already know the key to it. It was you who inspired me, Yi Futian said with a smile. His words attracted the attention of many, and while they all looked surprised, they were skeptical. Did he get it? But why was it that they didn't quite believe it? In front, the young man from the previous encounter frowned, but before he could speak, the woman next to him turned around to look at Yi Futian. She asked, What did you comprehend? Actually, This woman had similar thoughts as Yi Futian and Beigong Shuang. The more she steeped herself in it, the stronger her conviction became. Everything on the cliff was independent with no relation to one another. The young man next to her might have had it all wrong. However, she didn't say anything, just allowing the possibility that someone else could find the answer. The reason she turned around and asked him was because Yi Futian had declared that he knew the key to it all. I comprehended the mentality of thunder-punishing Skylord when he was cultivating here, said Yi Futian. Is that so? The young man glanced at him coldly and said, I would like to see that with my own eyes. Yi Futian smiled and said nothing. He continued to look at the cliff wall, starting from the first mark on the pattern, and comprehending from the beginning. This mark seemed to have been imprinted extremely clearly in his mind. In that case, watch closely, Yi Futian said. And a very bright divine light from his eyes directly shined upon the mark on the cliff. In that instant, there seemed to be an elusive figure that landed inside the mark and turned into an avatar of Yi Futian. The avatar moved as the mark also moved. It was as if it was now alive. Buzz. A brilliant glow burst out, and from the cliff, a small figure seemed to appear, as if the thunder-punishing Skylord himself had returned, waving an axe. Everyone could feel its power and speed, which forced many in front of the cliff to step back as if they were frightened. But after they had retreated, they found that there was no real damage. The illusion was not real, but it was real enough to trick them into believing that it was. Those around all turned their heads to look at Yi Futian with quite a shock. No one had been able to do the same as he had just done, urging the mark to release itself to the outside world so that all may perceive it. Could it be that he had truly comprehended it? The woman also had a look of surprise on her face as she gave Yi Futian a serious assessing look. The young man next to her had a terrible look on his face. Yi Futian did show him clearly what he could accomplish. If Yi Futian had really done it, then it would be a slap in the face for him. Previously, he was extremely high-handed when he announced that Beigong Shuang was flat-out wrong and that she was not worthy of arguing with him. After that, Yi Futian intervened. If Yi Futian confirmed that he was wrong today, then his shame would be unimaginable. It was just that apart from believing in his own judgment, he didn't think that Yi Futian could solve the secret of the cliff. Like Yi Futian, he believed that if he couldn't solve the riddle, then no one else could either, and that no one else would be able to decode this mystery. Because of this self-confidence, he had left himself no room for doubts. But it seemed that he was wrong after all. The other man was far more powerful than he initially thought. Yi Futian didn't care about their looks, nor did he pay any attention to these people. He concentrated on the front, and soon, the light of the second mark lit up. This sight made Beigong Ao and Beigong Shuang feel as if they were back on Eastern Deity Island. It was the same as before. Only he and he alone could unlock the relic left by those figures of the past. Was there any relic that could baffle him? Beigong Shuang and Beigong Ao couldn't help but ask themselves, this guy is a relic terminator. It's like there's nothing he can't decode. As the rays of light lit up, the brilliance released by the pattern on the cliff wall became stronger. Many people saw many phantom shadows dancing, waving their battle axes, and a terrifying conception bloomed from them. The cultivators around it had all felt the conception and didn't want to miss such an opportunity. Looks like he was right, the woman murmured. The marks on the cliff lit up. Everyone could clearly feel the conception. They felt those marks as when thunder-punishing Skylord had engraved them there in the days of yore, swinging his battle axe at his pleasure. There was no connection between each mark, and they did not converge into a set of axe techniques. This meant that Yi Futian was right. The young man next to her became even more embarrassed when he heard her words. An elder behind him said, or these chaotic axe techniques are a system themselves. They could be considered a complete set of axe techniques. Although this was not completely unreasonable, it did seem a bit far-fetched, all to save face for the young man. The woman understood it quite well, so she only nodded gently and said, perhaps it is so. As they were talking, brilliant bright lights shot out from the cliff wall, and a rumbling sound accompanied with it. As the light spread from the pattern toward the cliff wall next to this one, more and more marks lit up. Gradually, the cliffs in front of the coast were trembling violently, as the light of those marks started to make cracks on the cliffs, and each crack seemed to have been split by a battle-axe. With the strength of the thunder-punishing Skylord back then, these cliffs could not have borne the way he engraved here. Perhaps they were already full of fissures and cracks, sealed with the great path by the thunder-punishing Skylord. Maybe these marks were the key to unlock the mystery. This was probably why no one had been able to break it by force all these years. "It's about to break," many whispered as the bright light burst out, stinging their eyes. Those cracks tore open the cliff wall, and in an instant everything in front of them disappeared and turned into dust. Those who beheld the sight were quite emotional inside. After so many years, someone had actually decoded it. This, too, confirmed what Futian had said. He was right. On the contrary, it was the young man who was wrong. He had claimed that thunder-punishing Skylord had once been a guest at his house. But previously he was so insistent that Beigong Shuang was wrong. Thinking about it now, his display of aggression before seemed rather ironic. Many people glanced at the young man, and he clearly felt these gazes. As a top-notch genius Ren Huang, he felt embarrassed at this moment. His face was hot, and he did not speak, nor did he look at the others. Grimly, he kept his eyes forward. A horrific thunder field appeared in the space that was destroyed. In that field, there was a thunder divine orb floating in the air. It was like an eye that was swallowing up the terrifying thunder power between heaven and earth. One after another, the thundering lightning surrounded it and integrated with it. All the cultivators stood there, still, as if they dared not act rashly. This must be the treasure left by thunder-punishing Skylord. The thunder-punishing Skylord left the cliff here long ago. Not only did he not destroy it, but also he sealed a treasure here, clearly for the one who could decode the secret of the cliff. The elder did it, and the treasure should belong to him. At this time, a voice was heard, directing everyone's attention to the speaker. It was Lin Yuan. His remarks clearly implied that the treasure should go to Futian. No one else said anything. There were not many who could compete with Futian and his people. No one knew whether the group that argued with Futian would try to compete for this treasure. But the woman next to the young man glanced at him and said, "Let's go." Obviously, they had no intention to fight for it. From their perspective, this treasure was not that precious. Since it was Futian who decoded it, there was no need to fight. The other party must have come from a supreme principality. Very well. The young man nodded. It was obvious that he had lost this time. He turned his head to look at Futian. He smiled and said, "See you on Turtle Deity Island." Once he finished speaking, his group of people broke through the void and left. Futian glanced at the man who was leaving, then looked at that treasure, and said to Beigong Shuang, who was next to him, "Last time, the cloudwood was taken by your father. This time, this treasure belongs to you." "Me?" Beigong Shuang looked at Futian. "I have no shortage of treasures of this kind," said Futian with a smile. Beigong Shuang looked at him and then at her father, who nodded slightly at her. He said, "You may accept it." Beigong Shuang walked forward and did not refuse. Those who were next to them were confounded. A treasure of this level was given away just like that. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1994, Turtle Deity Island. Chapter 1994, Turtle Deity Island. Small boats were floating in the divine ocean, seemed to drift with the currents. From time to time, they would sail past one island city or another. The occupants of these small boats were Futian and the others. At this moment, Lin Yuan took out a map and looked into the distance, saying, "We are almost there. The next island city is Turtle Deity Island." On the small boat ahead, Futian nodded. In the past few days, they did not rush their journey but took their time to enjoy the scenery along the way, traveling at a comfortable speed. If there were tribulations to be overcome by Emperor Shi, they would have sped up their process. However, in the past few days, they had seen no sign of tribulations, so they moved along in a nice and leisurely manner. On the other boat, there were two people. Beigong Ao was guiding the boat forward, and in front of him, Beigong Shuang was cultivating with her eyes closed. Faintly, there were terrifying thunder intent permeating from her body as the power of thunder covered her. Beigong Ao controlled the fluctuation of the aftershocks so that she could cultivate in peace. That day, after Yi Futian had given the treasure to her, Beigong Shuang took it inside her body and began to cultivate and refine it. On the way here, she had been in the process of refining and cultivating. Before we get to Turtle Deity Island, I wonder if Shuang would finish cultivating, Yi Futian said with a smile. Let's wait and see. If not, I will stay with her in the Divine Ocean, said Beigong Ao. Although the chance of watching the three tribulations was a rare event, self-cultivation was equally important. This was an opportunity bestowed on Beigong Shuang, and it had the possibility to help her break through the realm. Before she finished cultivating, Beigong Ao would not interrupt her prematurely. As the small boats moved forward, the thunder intent on Beigong Shuang was getting stronger. Above the Divine Ocean, a thunderstorm suddenly manifested in the endless clear sky, rushing toward Beigong Shuang. Traces of lightning fell from the sky and descended on her. Beigong Ao looked up but did not attempt to stop the phenomenon. To Yi Futian, that treasure was nothing, so he gave it to Beigong Shuang instead. But Beigong Ao knew very well that without Yi Futian's involvement, they would never have been unable to obtain anything close to it in their lifetimes. It was just like the last time when he got the cloud wood in Eastern Deity Island. Ahead, Yi Futian, on the small boat, glanced in Beigong Shuang's direction. With a bright smile on his face, he asked, almost breaking through? Should be. Beigong Ao nodded. She saw that thunder's power in the void became increasingly stronger, causing restlessness in this part of the Divine Ocean. Waves continued to rise, turning into a terrifying thunder field. How terrifying! All the small boats stopped, and everyone was watching quietly. After a long while, the light of thunder in the sky dissipated, and Beigong Shuang floated back down and returned to the small boat. She regarded Yi Futian with her beautiful eyes and blinked, which got a chuckle out of Yi Futian. Continue forward, said Yi Futian. As his voice fell, all the boats accelerated forward. Let's go, Beigong Ao echoed the command. Suddenly the group accelerated forward. Behind them, Goddess Donglai watched all this quietly. There was even more admiration in those eyes that looked toward Yi Futian. No one knew how such a person had come to appear in the original realm. There were bound to be other powerful characters who would inevitably aggregate around him. He seemed to possess a natural quality that would make people follow him willingly. Someone like him, if achieving all his potential, the result must be astounding. No one knew how far Yi Futian could go in the future, but she would gladly wait and see. There were many rumors regarding Turtle Deity Island on the Divine Ocean continent. Some people said that Turtle Deity Island really had a turtle deity, while others claimed that this gigantic island was, in fact, the back of a black turtle. However, most people seem to think that Turtle Deity Island was so named because the island itself resembled Xuanwu, the black turtle. No matter what these rumors were, Turtle Deity Island was truly famous because of one cultivator, Emperor Shi. Not just Turtle Deity Island, but the entire Divine Ocean continent was known because of Emperor Shi, a top-notch existence enough to make an entire continent known to everyone. As they approached Turtle Deity Island, they could see those who were traveling in the void from time to time. Yi Futian and the others traveled in the sea as those in the air passed them by. Sometimes the aura in the void was extremely powerful, even a little alarming, and sometimes sounds of chatting and laughter could be heard. They could already see land in front of them. It was Turtle Deity Island. It's right in front. Lin Yuan was a little emotional. This time, following Yi Futian, he had the opportunity to see Emperor Shi face the tribulations up close and personal. How could he not be excited? Around Turtle Deity Island, there were many scattered islands. As they approached, they found that there were crowds everywhere. What's going on? Yi Futian looked concerned as he swept his divine consciousness over the crowd and found that countless cultivators were outside of Turtle Deity Island and did not set foot on the island. Voices came into his ears, and Yi Futian suddenly understood. He said in a low voice, "It seems that Turtle Deity Island is getting too crowded now, and they have begun to control those who entered." This is expected. Although Turtle Deity Island is extensive, it is only an island, and the number of people that can be accommodated is limited. However, this time, the entire Donghua domain was alarmed. With so many cultivators arriving, if all of them were to enter the island, Turtle Deity Island will be overcrowded, Goddess Donglai said from behind. Yi Futian nodded as they continued to move forward and came to the area where the crowd was being blocked out. An incredibly astonishing aura of the Great Path was in front of them and formed a heaviness that was difficult for them to continue pushing forward. The airspace was shut out too. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at the space above them. Those cultivators who were traveling through the air were also stopped. It seemed as if blocked by an invisible force. Afterward, they were drifted down and landed on the ground. Yi Futian and the others looked at the sea and saw a giant black turtle, but not just one. In this area of the ocean, there were many black turtles on the periphery of Turtle Deity Island. "Sir, how can we enter the island?" Yi Futian asked the person next to him. A few days ago, there was news from Turtle Deity Island that only those in the Upper Renhuang realm may enter the island. The others, unless led by a top figure, then they may enter together, the man responded. Yi Futian nodded and stepped forward, saying, "Turtle Elder, we came from Dongshao continent and hoped that we might be an exception." The black turtle glanced at him with some contempt in his eyes, then dived into the water. Yi Futian walked forward, facing that massive resistance of the Great Path, and continued. Seeing this forced entry, that black turtle of the Upper Renhuang realm raised his head to give him a look as a terrifying wave slapped toward him. Yi Futian waved his hand toward the void, like the light from an axe slashing down and split the waves apart. He moved like an invasive stream of light and rushed directly toward the black turtle. The giant wave soared as the black turtle rushed toward Yi Futian through the water. A hefty pressure landed on Yi Futian. Yi Futian didn't bother to avoid it. Both of his palms pushed forward, and a terrifying force slapped down and suppressed it, like a monument of the Great Path. A dull thud was heard in the void, and that massive black turtle was knocked back into the sea. Yi Futian's figure flashed. He landed squarely on the turtle's back, saying, "Elder, please make an exception for us. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. What is this sudden change in attitude? Thank you, Senior. Yi Futian opened his hands, and the black turtle swallowed the elixir immediately. Xia Qingyuan and the rest climbed onto his back. The black turtle turned around and dived into the divine ocean and entered the forbidden space, heading in the direction of Turtle Deity Island. Many practitioners were speechless as they watched the receding silhouettes. How can even demons be this materialistic? Just one elixir was enough to convince him to ignore the rules? How can this be allowed? They all thought. The black turtle carried Yi Futian and his friends forward, and very quickly, they neared Turtle Deity Island. Senior Turtle, many members of top-tier factions have already arrived on Turtle Deity Island already, right? Yi Futian asked. The black turtle nodded. Quite a few have arrived already. Even if they have yet to reach, they should at least be in the divine ocean continent. There are only a few days left to Emperor Shi overcoming his tribulations, and no one wants to miss it. You have exceptional strength too, so I'm guessing that you have forged a perfect grade divine wheel, right? Surely you must also hail from an extraordinary faction. Where are you from? I come from the Dongshao continent, Yi Futian replied. The Dongshao continent? That should be the Millet Emperor's territory, right? Are you a practitioner from Wangshan Watchtower? The black turtle indeed understood quite a bit. He knew a little about the various top-tier practitioners in the Donghua domain. After all, there weren't many practitioners of such level. I guess I count as one of them, Yi Futian replied. I hear that there is a practitioner in the Wangshan Watchtower named Zong Chan. Do you know him? The black turtle asked. Senior, you have heard of him as well? Yi Futian asked. I've heard of him from the people who entered the island these past few days. They say that Zong Chan of the Wangshan Watchtower had already become a high-level Renhuang with a perfect great path. It is said that he has unlimited potential, and it is almost certain that he will become yet another titan of the Donghua domain in the future, the black turtle said. I understand. Thank you, senior, for your reminder. Yi Futian nodded. The black turtle brought them to the shore of the turtle deity island. The formless pressure of the great path dissipated. Yi Futian no longer felt the pressure. We have arrived, said the black turtle. Thank you for your trouble. Yi Futian nodded and stepped out. The group of them stepped onto the turtle deity island, and the black turtle dived into the sea, heading back from where they came from. Quickly, he vanished from their sights. Yi Futian walked around on the island, and like they expected, there were many people on the island. Practitioners of various cultivation levels were all present on the island. In the past, there were no restrictions on who could enter the island. Chapter 1997, Virtuosos from All Over the World. Chapter 1997, Virtuosos from All Over the World. Turtle Peak was very spacious. It was the cultivation grounds of Emperor Shi. No one dared to disturb Emperor Shi when they ascended the peak. They only stood at the outer regions of the Turtle Peak. When Yi Futian and his group stepped onto Turtle Peak, they gazed into the distance. There were a few structures that were not quite majestic and seemed to be casually arranged in that direction. However, they seemed to carry an ethereal air of deities. It was as though they were in the realm of deities. It was exactly where Emperor Shi was at. Many virtuosos had scaled the Turtle Peak. In this vast group of people, many had an extremely high level of cultivation. High-level Renowangs could be found everywhere on the peak. At that time, Yi Futian felt that someone was looking at him. He turned and looked around. He saw someone familiar. He met this practitioner when he was training on the Eastern Deity Island, Jiang Jiuming from the Jiang clan ancient royal family. The Jiang clan ancient royal family was an extremely old clan. It was the protector of the Luotian continent, which was one of the 7 continents. The clan was crowded with virtuosos, and Jiang Jiuming was one of the top practitioners in his generation. Since the Luotian continent and the Penglai continent were both in the east of the Donghua domain, they were quite close. When Jiang Jiuming went to train on the Eastern Deity Island the last time, he was also there to see if he could obtain elixirs from the Eastern Deity Island. Unfortunately, he failed. However, on Eastern Deity Island, he encountered an extremely exceptional practitioner, Yi Futian. At that moment, Jiang Jiuming walked towards Yi Futian. Behind him were a couple of practitioners from the Jiang clan ancient royal family. He stopped in front of Yi Futian and said, "Such a coincidence. I did not expect to meet Brother Yi and the Island Lord again." The Island Lord, of course, referred to the Donglai goddess. It's a coincidence indeed. Yi Futian smiled. After learning about the Donghua domain, he understood that the Jiang clan ancient royal family was the strongest clan in the Luotian continent. They were mysterious and ancient, and they had an abundance of resources. This is also somewhat expected. With such great talent, Brother Yi naturally would emerge from the Penglai continent. I guess it isn't strange that you have appeared here as well, Jiang Jiuming smiled. Looking at the Zhong Chan, Li Changxing, and the rest who were standing beside Yi Futian, he said, "I am Jiang Jiuming from the Jiang clan. You are all practitioners from the Wangshan Watchtower, right?" Just now, he had roughly analyzed Yi Futian's group and walked over after identifying Zhong Chan and the others. At the entrance test to the Wangshan Watchtower, and utterly defeated all the virtuosos. The prince of the great Yan ancient royal family, Yan Dongyang, led his army of virtuosos from the Yenyun continent to the entrance test and absolutely crushed the practitioners of the Dongshao continent. However, he was stopped by Yi Futian and subsequently defeated by him, the lady said. Yi Futian is at the 4th Renhuang level. He has a perfect grade divine wheel. He is well versed in alchemy, swordsmanship, rhythmic sorcery, and various other skills. It took him only one strike of his sword to defeat Yan Dongyang. Swordsmanship. A quizzical expression flashed through Qin Qing's eyes as she looked at Yi Futian. No wonder he could sense and comprehend the will of the axe at the cliff the other day. It seemed like he was an exceptionally outstanding practitioner. It looks like I lost to him for a good reason the other day. Ling Yi smiled. He seemed very casual, as though he was not bothered by that event. "You all know him?" asked the lady. "I met him when I was traveling in the Divine Ocean continent. He managed to decrypt the relics left behind as runes carved out by the thunder-punishing Skylord," said Qin Qin. The woman nodded her head lightly and looked at Yi Futian. "Is this the heir chosen by the Eastern Deity Island?" she thought. No matter who he was, it was unlikely that the great Yan ancient royal family was going to let him off. Yi Futian felt the stares and lifted his head to look towards the divine palace of fluttering snow. The Li Changsheng beside him asked, "Brother Yi, they are talking about you. When did you become acquaintances with the goddesses of the divine palace of fluttering snow?" "We have met once before," Yi Futian replied. "We aren't really acquainted." Li Changxing nodded lightly. This rascal was quite eye-catching, it seemed. They were only separated for a short while, and he had already got to know the people from the divine palace of fluttering snow. Furthermore, they seemed to think pretty highly of him. "I am Ling He from the Lingxiao Palace. I did not know who you were back at the Divine Ocean, but now let's be acquaintances." Ling He nodded lightly at Yi Futian. He seemed to be rather friendly. Yi Futian glanced at him. That day, Ling He was especially overbearing and arrogant, but he will not be hostile towards someone who showed no malice, and so he also lightly nodded in response. However, he did not say much more either and only responded in courtesy. He did not intend to be acquaintances with him. Seeing Yi Futian's attitude, Ling He's heart turned a little cold, but he did not show it. He thought that this prodigy who joined the Wangshan Watchtower was probably feeling pretty cocky at that moment. "I am Qin Qin from the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow." Qin Qin also nodded at Yi Futian. "I am Yi Lianyan." Yi Futian nodded in response. He decided to show a little more friendliness to Qin Qin because Qin Qin did not act in such an unforgivably rude manner the other day. It was certainly not because she was beautiful. In a certain place in the crowd, someone was looking at these two parties conversing. They were the people from the Turtle Deity City Lord's office. They heard what the two groups were talking about. After all, they did not intentionally try to avoid interfering, so they roughly understood some things that were happening. This Ling He was so superficial. Yi Futian probably did not know what Ling He had done. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.